Hey everyone, welcome to the Dankcast Dungeon and welcome to our very first podcast. This is going to be Dankcast Episode 1. What is the best power level to play Commander at? I'm Jason. Here we got
Corbin.
Hell yeah.
Stormin Corbin.
And I'm Brent.
I am Matt.
Let's go ahead and start with, what is power level to you? What do you think actually makes a deck powerful?
There's a couple different things that I think go into this. If your game plan is bad, it doesn't matter what really good cards you put in there. You can put Mana Crypt in the deck, you can put Mox Diamond in the deck, you can put Mishra's Workshop in the deck. And if your game plan is, I am going to cast my 5 mana Zerlin of the Claw and later on go find a dragon and put it into play, it's probably going to lose to precons some percentage of the time. I speak from experience there.
Losing to precons, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do that all the time.
Mainly me.
Mainly Corbin. But no, I mean, just I have a Zerlin deck, and I've had a Zerlin deck for a long time, and I've tried very hard to make it, reasonable, but it's still a 5 mana commander in mono red, and it's really hard to do the thing you want to do, basically no matter what you put in there. Conversely, I have built for a budget league, Reddit Drabic, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and I played against some friends that I used to play with a lot, and I beat them on turn 4 because, turns out, my game plan for that deck is very simple to execute, and there's a lot of redundancy in combos and stuff, and the deck is a lot stronger than Zerlin because even though I was not running any expensive cards or any of the Moxen or Ancient Tombs or any of that, the game plan is solid and it's easy to execute.
I had a same kind of thing with that. Like my budget league deck, I built Shorkai at one point. $75 was our limit, and I could have won on turn 1 with a dramatic reversal combo. The way I see decks, though, is that there's what people call CDH. There's optimally tuned. There's optimally tuned, but on a theme-ish, like a funny-ish theme. Then there's precons, and then there's why did you build this, to put it nicely. I feel like a lot of people fall into the optimally tuned themed deck, where they have 10 pet cards that maybe they could cut to make it way more tuned. Hell, my Tivit deck was like that before I started going more into it. I was playing Expropriate.
You're still playing Expropriate?
Nope, I cut that. It got cut for Chicago.
Yep.
I mean, originally it was a voting deck. I did my best to make it a voting deck, but turns out the deck's just too good. So it just kept doing time sieve things. I feel like pet cards bog people down a lot. Knowing the proper amount of lands versus mana abilities. Corbin knows a lot better about that. He's very good at figuring out what your deck should be for that. I feel like that's where a lot of people get tricked up, and then the amount of interaction they should be playing. That changes a lot on what level your deck is, in my opinion.
If you have a game plan and you stick to it, and you know what all the cards in your deck do to contribute to that game plan, and the game plan itself is powerful, then your deck's going to be good.
Things that could make a deck powerful, I think speed is a big one. Decks vary a lot and when they can actually win the game. And yeah, consistency I also have written down. If you're consistently doing the same thing every game, you're going to get a lot more wins.
Hot take number 1. We can put this on the screen. Power level only matters. Power level only makes sense when each pilot is at roughly the same skill level. When you sit down at a pod, odds are you're going to be sitting down with people with a range of skill levels, wants and desires. Power level doesn't make sense at that point because what you think is a 70% deck, your opponent might think is a 90% deck, or dare I say it's CEDH. My problem is when people take their opinions and try to put that on other people. Everybody has their own definition of fun.
Yeah, that's a question later in the episode.
Yeah, y'all didn't look at this outline at all.
No, I didn't look at this outline at all. So we'll talk about that later, I suppose. But how I define power level is how do the people in at the table that I'm playing with, how do they want to have fun and how do I want to have fun? I like casting multiple spells in one turn or casting exactly one spell every turn.
It ranges.
And no, there's no range. It's either I'm going to cast all the spells or I'm going to play Rule of Law and nobody can cast all the spells.
Being multiplayer does give you some amount of lenience as well with power level. If you're going to sit down with something that isn't quite CEDH in a pod with 3 people who are playing CEDH, maybe they all knock each other out in some way and you slip in that humility and then they all stare at you because they don't run any interaction because they're trying to combo out as fast as possible.
If you are a good player, you just know what your windows are and the downsides of your deck for not playing optimal cards, and certain tables you can just pull through anyway.
Can't confirm. That is the thing. I mean, I've beaten people multiple times with decks I have no business winning with. Pre-cons, $50 budget decks. I've seen a $20 mono white deck win a competitive pod. A lot of power level actually dictates player skill, but people don't want to admit that because that would require them to look inward and fix something potentially about their playstyle that they don't want to fix. And you don't have to fix it, but you have to be okay losing. People want to win. No matter how much we convince ourselves we don't want to win with our stupid door tribal deck.
I actually don't know if Michael cares about winning. I don't know how many games you played with him.
So, specifically, there are some people who don't care about winning.
Yeah.
Truly don't care about winning.
It is a low number. But
I'm
going to stand up for Michael. I don't think he cares.
100%. What I was going to say is that if people didn't care about winning, people wouldn't get salty.
Yeah.
So your person that comes to your CD or your CEDH, your EDH nights that are just chaos incarnate, and they literally don't care if they lose, and you have never seen this person get salty, yeah, they probably genuinely don't care about losing. But if we didn't care about losing, if we didn't want to win, people would not get salty.
I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Just because you don't want to win doesn't mean that you don't have a goal in mind. If you have Thassa's Oracle and Tainted Pact in your hand, and you play it right away, and you win the game, there are going to be a lot more people upset about that than if you just sit on it for 10 turns and then win. The outcome is the same, but the journey to get there is different. Specifically, I would like to play a bunch of artifacts and tap them all a bunch of times and put counters on everything deck. Got to play a bunch of artifacts and put counters on everything, and even though they didn't win, they got to do the thing that they were trying to do.
I can agree with that.
It does feel better when you get to do your thing at least.
Yeah.
One thing that's always...
I didn't win, but at least, the deck worked.
So I will say the deck working is still, in that particular instance, that is winning. Like, it's not winning the game, but it's winning the game that you set forth for yourself.
It's achieving your goal. Yeah. I don't think we can just redefine the word win.
You won at achieving your goal.
Sure. Okay, fine.
I think that is enough for some people, but I think most people, it's probably both. They want to do their thing, and they are still trying to win. Because you could tell as a game drags on towards 2.5, 3 hours, and we were like, maybe we should just wrap this up, and everyone's like, no. We're going to keep playing.
Until we get a winner.
You know that doing the thing was not enough at that point. That happens here on the channel. Where Gabe just go on, it's like, maybe someone should throw the game. Everyone's like, yeah, maybe. And no one throws it.
The one thing I've never understood, and maybe people in the comments could put their opinion in on about it, why do you feel better when, same pod, same exact players, game 1, I win with 2-lane food chain combo. Game 2, same deck. On turn 5, I win with the food chain combo. Same deck, same pod. Turn 5, I win with Finale of Devastation and overrun you. For some odd reason, dying to combat damage on the same turn that I comboed out on, people seem to be fine with.
Because we convinced ourselves that combo is like the boogeyman, and anybody who plays combo should go to the dark, fiery place underneath us.
CEDH?
So... And I'm speaking from experience. I used to have this issue. Before I started playing Magic, I used to play a lot of fighting video games. And I would, Tekken, Street Fighter, all of that. And being a young kid, I would get pissed if somebody won in a way that I didn't deem proper. So it's like, oh my goodness, you spam fireballs all the game.
Kicking you while you're in the air still?
Yeah.
Letting you let the ground?
And so I remember getting so mad when I would lose to this stuff. And then I was watching a YouTube video once, and somebody was complaining about it. And whoever was on this YouTube video with them just said, well, that's all they need to do because you suck. You didn't do anything that caused this person to change their game plan.
Yeah.
So they beat you with the most effective tactic in the easiest tactic, which was spamming fireballs. And that was so eye-opening to me. I was just like, okay, it's me. I'm the problem. So I started changing my styles. I started looking up how to counter, projectiles, what characters are good at that, stuff like that. Completely changed how I viewed games in general. And so, like, coming to Magic, if somebody's winning with Thassa's Oracle, I will go on the record, I don't like Thassa's Oracle combo. I barely like Aetherflux Reservoir because I like old school Storm decks, and I think Aetherflux Reservoir is Storm training wheels. But I'm not going to get mad at somebody for playing that. I'm going to put ways in my deck to counter those ways if they're prevalent and where I'm playing. And if it happens, it happens. But honestly, it might be my fault if it happens. If I let my opponent get away with stuff like that, look inward. Sometimes you can't stop a thing, or sometimes you try to stop a thing and somebody else blows up your creature, or that was stopping the combo or whatever. And that's just a learning experience for everybody. But if you don't have interaction in your deck and you're mad that you're getting bullied by the same things, that is your fault.
See, now that you made me think about it, I thought back to what a video game for me would be Call of Duty, going into the same campground repeatedly, just keep running into him. Why was I doing that? Why was I doing that? I'm just playing into his gameplay.
We get so mad at small campers. It's like, bro, just move in the other direction.
I had a couple more things on what makes a deck powerful here written down. The size of your wallet. How much do you think that affects power level? Because there are some cards that are super powerful that can be easy wins that are hundreds of dollars.
100%, yeah. Like, I think to an extent.
You'd be surprised. Like, yeah, it's when you have Jewel Lotus and Mox Diamond and Ancient Tomb and City
Mana
Traders
Crypt.
and Mana Crypt and all that.
Guy's Cradle.
Yep. Very few of the cards that are extremely powerful, that are extremely expensive, open up like new lines of play. They just help you do the ones that you already had a little bit faster.
Yep.
And that will obviously make the deck more powerful, but when you are playing a 99 card deck and the difference between having Soul Ring and having Soul Ring plus Mana Crypt is like a certain percentage of your draws will be more consistent. And sometimes you'll get both of them and you'll be able to, do whatever it is you're trying to do like extremely quickly and the deck will be stronger. But like the example I made up before, between Zerlin and Ratadrabik, the Ratadrabik deck is a budget deck. It doesn't have Soul Ring. I mean, it does have Soul Ring. It doesn't have Mana Crypt or anything like that. And it's still the better deck.
You look at cards like Time Twister, stuff like that are thousands of dollars.
What's that mono red gauntlet?
Oh, Gauntlet of Might.
Gauntlet of Might is a bad card, though. There are a lot of very expensive cards, Juzam Jin, for instance, that no one plays because they're bad, but they are very expensive because they are rare.
There are also these other cards called the original dual lands.
Yeah, so that's
While
another thing.
expensive, how good are they actually?
They are very good, but the thing is, like, when you're adding them to the deck, it's the same thing of the Soul Ring Mana Crypt problem. Like, you will have one more hit for your fetch lands, and you will have one more dual land that comes into play untapped that makes both of your colors, or two of your colors, or whatever. Percentage-wise, like, that's not the thing that's winning you the game. It's the rest of your deck, and the fact that you can do whatever it is that you're trying to do. If I took all the dual lands out of all my decks, like I do on the channel, they're still basically going to be the same deck. They're going to be a little bit worse, but I don't think that is the difference between them winning and losing most of the time.
Can confirm. I'm talking to you right now. I own 3 dual lands. The Volcanic Island, Underground Sea, Badlands.
And they're for a pet deck.
And they're for a deck that I don't play a lot because it's an actual CEDH deck. I've won more games than you. Stop getting hung up on dual lands. They don't matter. Like, the amount of people that I've beaten that have played dual lands against me, turn 1, 3, 4, 5, whatever, 5 color deck, 10 duels, 10 shocks, and I've won. You're getting hung up on the wrong things.
One of the things that was hardest for me to learn about lands and how to make your land base better was just stop playing enter tapped lands. Unless they are specifically like helping to do something for your deck that is very helpful for your deck.
Sure, yeah.
But
yeah, Field of the Dead or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like Valakut.
Or typically on the channel, you guys run them as replacement for the OG duels.
there are some that are fetchable that will play just because there are times you don't need the land to enter untapped. But a lot of them still have conditions to enter untapped if we need them to. That we're trying to achieve anyways.
The ones that you don't, like, there's a good reason to run them in specific decks. For one, if you're playing a 2-color deck, Sometimes you need the color consistency because you're playing a lot of different color pips, and you just need like additional ways to get that. And the chance that you draw the one tapped dual in your deck versus like the ability to fetch it when you need it could be worth it, especially if you're playing things like Nature's Lore and you need a certain number of forests, or you're playing things like High Tide and you need a certain number of islands, Mystic Sanctuary, etc., etc., etc. What you don't want to do is like, I built a 5-color deck with all of the guild gates, and if that's not your game plan is to win by Maze's End, like you're not specifically trying to win with Maze's End, don't play Guild Gates. Don't play anything like the Guild Gates. Don't play that comes into play tapped lands that let you scry one.
If your goal is to maximize your deck's effectiveness and its speed, one of the easiest things to do is make sure your lands come into play untapped. Now, if your main goal is not that, for whatever reason, like maybe your meta is slower, I think coming to play tap lands are fine as long as they're advancing your color game plan. So my cycling deck actually has a lot of enter the battlefield's tap lands for 2 reasons. 1, because a lot of the lands that cycle into the battlefield tapped. And 2, I run a lot of swamps because I've actually layered a couple strategies into that deck. And one of them is using specifically black creatures for the land Crypt of Agadim to get more black mana so you can cycle more cards. We won't go into the details. But a lot of the black creatures that cycle, swamp cycle. So playing swamp type lands, and a lot of them coming to play tapped, is actually beneficial to me because I don't care that they come into play tap the turn I'm swamp cycling. I want to build my resources so that I can do a bunch of actions in one turn down the road.
There are, of course, good reasons to do anything in particular, but like as a general rule, if you want your deck to be better, take them out.
It's kind of also would be one of the least obvious ways to power up your deck and not make people angry.
Yeah.
Like, just take those lands out. People aren't going to get mad at you for not running them.
Speaking of lands that you shouldn't be playing, stop playing Temple of the False God.
No, don't listen to him.
Let's go ahead and move on to a little behind the scenes action here on what we use on the channel as far as restrictions go.
I can't play any of my cards that I want to play.
You don't even, like...
I got
you. Come in here with $50 decks. Like, everyone else is playing 800. You're still bringing 50. It just doesn't even really apply to you.
Whenever someone trades with Corbin, they walk away with 3 cards, and he walks away with like 100 because he wants all these bad like quarter cards and 10-cent cards.
I will find cards, mostly because I think it's funny to win with cards that people don't expect, like Hurricane. You can find a way to do it if you try hard enough and get out of your own way. I don't use budget as a restriction on why my decks can't perform or be good or whatever. I just like playing what I like to play. So if you surmise the only way your deck is going to get better is to add more sought after cards, like, yeah, that's going to raise the cost of your deck. But I've seen a lot of decks that aren't designed to do anything except like cast door to nothingness that have to run infinite combos and stuff because that's the easiest way to achieve that goal. For me, the journey of deck building is more of why I play this game. I love building decks. I love finding, kind of like Matt said, I love finding decks that do out of pocket things like my cycling deck, like my random color storm deck. But what I found is you don't need a lot of high-end cards to achieve those goals.
You just have to have a giant fucking brain.
Just be better.
What Corbin's really saying is that he's smarter than everyone.
That's not what I'm saying.
Where were we?
Our restrictions.
Oh yeah, the power level we play out here.
The Dictator Jason.
I don't know what power level it would be, but I did employ some restrictions at some point because these 3 fellas tend to be more competitive than the other half of the group. So we implemented a couple of restrictions. The first one, we do have a budget restriction. So we can only have 3 cards in our deck that are more than $30. And we can't have any cards that are over $100. So 3 cards in between 30 to 100. I also put a rider in there for shock lands and fetch lands because they are so prevalent in the format. and I don't think people get mad at them.
I would assume not. A lot of those fetch lands are floating around $30, so it's like,
Yeah,
well, this week I can play Polluted Delta.
They go up and down so much, and it feels bad like you're running Dimir and someone else is running Boros. They could have all their shocks and stuff, and you can't because
Yeah.
they're all over 30. But yeah, so we could just include those at will. They're immune to the price restrictions.
I would like to point out the only reason I was running Mana Crypt was because everybody else was running Mana Crypt. I own one Mana Crypt in real life, and it goes in the same deck that has the dual lands, so I usually do not play with it.
The budget restrictions we have there are actually like pretty reasonable in terms of kind of equalizing things. Like I said before, a lot of the power in the decks comes from the card choices, and if you are playing a bunch of cards that are cheap but still go towards your game plan, you're still going to have a reasonable deck.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, if your deck's all $20 cards, it does add up pretty fast.
The decks we play, I will say the decks we play aren't cheap. They can get close to $1,000 if every card is $20 to $29 in there.
But a lot of that is sometimes because they're newer cards too. Some of those cards just have like a high price because we're still
the hype chain.
Yeah, the hype chain of them coming out.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is those fetches and shocks that we mentioned because
Yeah.
they are still randomly expensive, and like if you get them once, then you don't need to get them again mostly, and the price of the decks comes down pretty significantly at that point.
We put our lists over on Patreon, and I want them to be accessible to people. Like, I think most of them are around $500, $600. The average is probably a little bit lower because of Corbin, pulling it down to like $3 with his $50 decks. But
I think rather than the budget, the more equalizing thing is the fact that we are trying to build around these commanders to showcase them. If I build, if we go back a couple of weeks to the Lazav deck that I built, if I put in Thassa's Oracle and Console, the deck
can
is
I just say Lazav, Wearer of Faces?
Lazav, Wearer of Faces.
It's like a super metal name.
The kids at home, Matt, what is his name?
Lazav, Wearer of Faces. So anyway,
75% of Jason's job is just editing out Corbin's laughs.
so if my Lazav Wearer of Faces deck includes Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact or whatever, the deck feels a lot different. It acts a lot different. My game plan is different. I'm trying to execute this 2-card combo, and Lazav's mostly just there to draw cards because, like, he draws cards, and drawing cards is pretty good. And I feel like the restriction that we were trying to actually build around the commander.
All right, we haven't mentioned that restriction yet.
Oh.
We can go there.
Yeah.
So we do have the budget restriction. Then we also have a combo restriction, which is we try to just stay away from 2-card combos as much as possible because they're just so prevalent and everyone's seen them. We do have one exception if we're previewing a new commander and there's some new hot combo that combos with the commander. We allow it. Other than that, we try to stick away from 2-card combos. And if we do run combos, we try to make them be on theme with the commander, whatever that means. You know it when you see it.
Yeah, it's more like we're trying to showcase these commanders. Like, we could build, like, if every blue-black deck was just a console deck, then why would you come watch the channel? You'd be like, okay, how long does it take Matt to find Thassa's Oracle this game?
I think that's all the restrictions we have.
Yeah, speaking of combo restrictions and all that, like, trying to build around your commander, like I said before, trying to showcase the commander and do all that. I had someone that we play with fairly frequently come up to me recently and be like, hey, I really like the kinds of decks you build on the channel. I kind of want to build that kind of a power level deck. I want to build that same thing. And I explained to him, well, we've got this budget restriction and we have this combo thing where, like, don't build your 2-card combo and, like, build kind of around the commander. And he said, I don't really know how to do that. And I'm like, well, what do we mean by build around the commander? That's kind of a difficult thing to define. Like,
It's vibes, man.
yeah, it's vibes, man.
The way I look at it, you can go one of two directions. You can take a look at your commander and see, okay, what does this commander want to be doing in the course of a game? So if we use the Wearer of Faces as an example, he wants to be turning into creatures by use of clues. So what creatures do you want him to be turning into? That's going to be depending on how you want to play the game. If you want to have him turn into big dumb animals like strict Riverwinder, then you can play those cards. You have the option to turn them into creatures that do stuff when they connect or exist on the battlefield, like Kozilek the Great Distortion or Phage the Untouchable, without having the restrictions, deck building restrictions of Phage, i.e., I have to cast this card from my hand.
Taking a slight side note, there's a game that will never come to light because it went over 3 hours, and I decided not to edit it. But Matt was able to turn Lazav, Wearer of Faces, into a Phage the Untouchable, and he touched me.
He did.
I did.
He gave him that touch.
Jason got to watch us for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That's the real reason you'll never see it.
That's the real reason. So you taking that commander and figuring out what it wants to be doing over the course of the game, or what you want it to be doing. Because you could also take Lazav a combo route and have him turn into a creature like Razaketh. And now you have Razaketh's activated ability. Or Villis, or any of these other huge demons that do things while they just exist on the battlefield. So you have options. The other option is to build a deck or know what type of deck you want to build, and then find a commander that fits the strategy of that deck, which is usually how I build decks, because I usually come up with how I want to play the game first, and then I find a commander that supports me. For example, my cycling deck. I just want to cycle a bunch of cards and eventually kill people with Sir Conrad or Glinthorn Buccaneer triggers. So at that point, what colors do I want to run? Okay, what commanders do I have in those colors? Kydell is my commander specifically because she works with cycling to make me more mana so I can cycle more cards. And Vile Smasher is there specifically for the colors, unfortunately. If another black-red partner commander comes out, I will be very interested in that to see what I can, if I can swap them and actually have the commander matter. But until then, Vile Smasher is just cheerleading Kydell on her way to finishing the Peloton World Finals. But I think those are the two distinct ways to build around your commander.
I would say that, like, in general, the more powerful decks are the ones that you are building around a theme, like the second version that Corbin mentioned just now. Like, if you have a specific thing you want the deck to do, and then you choose a commander that does that thing, it is generally stronger than choosing a commander and then building around it.
Why is that, Matt?
Why is that? Well, there's a couple different reasons. For one, it's possible that the thing that your commander is doing that it wants to do is not very good. I.e., Zerlin of the Claw. He's wants you to put dragons into play, and he's very good at finding dragons out of your deck once you reach the 5 mana threshold to play him, and then the 3 mana to activate him. But if you are just trying to build a dragon deck, even a mono-red dragon deck, probably not who I would choose. I mean, I did, because I think he's sweet. But conversely, if you're trying to build a deck that is like, I want to put a bunch of artifacts into play, I want to do artifact things, I want to use Clock of Omens to the best of its ability, etc., 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 and then you choose your commander based off of that, like, I want all these cards, so it's got to be these colors, I want to be able to find certain things with my commander, or I want to have artifacts in the command zone to go with my strategy, you're probably going to have a better deck.
If you choose your deck first and your commander second, your deck becomes more consistent because it can do the thing whether you play your commander or not. When you build your deck around your commander, and a lot of feel bads can happen if something happens that either prevents you from playing your commander or prevents you from using your commander. So like Kinrith Transformation, Dranith Magistrate.
Out of time.
Humility. Like all these cards that prevent your commander from functioning, it hurts more. And it's like, okay, I can't do my thing now, so I'm going to get mad. Which is fair, but look at what your deck is trying to do. So ask yourself, as you're building this deck around your commander, what things can stop me? And maybe you don't know the answer right away, so you just keep a lookout. When I lose games or when my commander can't do the thing, why is that? And that will inform what pieces of interaction and removal that you put in your deck. Do you just lose to Rule of Law if it resolves? Granted, not many people are playing Rule of Law, but let's say they are. Run Naturalize if you're in green. If you're in mono black,
the Swarm.
there's Feed the Swarm now, and that's it.
A good example of that was when Obnixless Captive Kingpin came out.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the decks were running... Oh, I don't remember the name of the card. The sideboard card that deals, like, 4 damage to a white or blue creature and can't be countered.
While we're trying to figure this out, it's on the screen already.
The card that you see in front of you is the card we're talking about, probably. And the reason that they were doing that is because the deck, like, hard loses to Drannith Magistrate. And if you don't have, like, multiple different ways to get rid of Drannith Magistrate, your deck is not going to do anything.
And
Which,
they
to
play
come
their
back to our discussion on power level, your deck is more powerful when you can actually do the thing that you're trying to do. Make sure you're on enough interaction to stop people that are trying to stop you from doing your thing.
A lot of people don't like doing that, but just is what it is.
I think the issue is that commander decks, you can only play 99 cards, 98 cards if you have a partner. People
third of
want
those
to,
are lands.
yeah, a third of those are lands.
Ish.
Hopefully, approximately. Should be more than a third of your land. If you're playing not hyper competitive, you should be playing more lands. That's my second hot take of the night.
As an aside on that, lands are busted. We are getting way off topic here.
I know.
But if you want another thing that can increase the power level of your deck is to play enough lands. And there are mathematical reasons why you want to get so many mana sources into your deck. And specifically lands are very good because they don't cost anything to put into play. Every time you draw one, you can play one for turn. And the whole taboo behind blowing up everyone's lands exists in some of the more casual pods, and it's not a very good strategy in the more competitive things. So all of the times people are not going to mess with your lands.
Yeah.
The reason they're not so good in the competitive things is because they replace those extra lands with fast mana artifacts.
Mana. Yep.
Moxes and
So-
Llanowar Elves and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can get into that in another podcast,
Yeah.
like mana denial strategies and stuff.
I would
But-
love to get into a podcast episode of why stacks is a good thing and everyone should have a stack deck, but
Anyway, back to what I was talking about. You want to maximize the amount of fun you're having. And so we convince ourselves that, well, I'm not going to play this interaction because I want to play more cards that I think are cool. But then you can't consistently do the thing you want your deck to do because you have to understand that you are in a game with 3 other people that want to either do their thing or win. And that is going to directly oppose what you are trying to do. It's like chess. You don't get mad at chess or checkers. You don't get mad at your opponent for taking your pieces or moving in a way that prevents you from advancing your game plan. Or at least you shouldn't. Yeah, wow. Okay. Because you're just defeating the point of the game. If there are cool cards that you really want to play, and you might not, if you look at your deck objectively or have a trusted friend look at your deck objectively and they tell you to take that card out, be petty like me and find another deck for that card. So I would love the Great Aurora to be in every green deck that I play until the end of time. But sometimes that card is just not good in the deck that you're trying to play. So I find a deck for that card. If I have to take cards out of decks because they're not advancing my game plan or they're not meshing in the way that I want them to, I either need to change the deck to accommodate that card or find a new deck for that card. I have a whole stack of cards on my desk at home that are cards that I want to find homes for, that I'm just waiting for the spark of creativity to hit me or something like that.
Spark of creativity can't hit players.
The whole point of that tangent is be okay with playing less of your pet cards and do what I do, which I find removal and interaction that are arguably pet cards that function. So, for example, most of the removal in my cycling deck, it also cycles. I don't play a whole lot of removal in that deck that doesn't either cycle or have to do with the number of cards in my graveyard, because that is what my deck wants to do. So I want interaction that is on theme with that. I don't feel the same amount of loss as I would, I have to take this card out for a counterspell. Now it's like I have to take this card out for circular logic. Look it up, or it's over there somewhere. It's a lot better for me, spirit-wise and mentally, because now my deck is still doing things on the same axis of what it wants to do, which is discarding cards and having a large graveyard.
Yeah, but to that point though, you do definitely want to put cards in your deck
That interact.
because like let's take that Obnixilis example from before. If you are trying to combo off and you hit the card Combust, the card's name is Combust, by the way.
We did it.
We did it. I remembered it and looked it up to make sure that I wasn't picking things up. If you are coming off and you hit the card Combust, it's going to feel bad because that card could have been something else that helps you combo out. However, if you are in a situation where you have drawn a card that isn't Combust and you can't combo out because you don't have Combust, your game plan is so much more hindered by the fact that you can't actually do it because you don't have the card to enable you to do it.
So that was the discussion about the restrictions we have on the channel, or something like that.
So we started.
Why? Restrictions and why?
Yeah, that was the why. So that's going to bring us to, what power level do you prefer to play at?
Kind of depends on what I'm feeling. Sort of like there are a lot of different things I want to do in Magic the Gathering. There are a lot of different types of play styles I enjoy. When I play Legacy, a different format of Magic the Gathering, for those of you unaware, I will build whatever kind of weird deck showed up in the recent online Legacy leagues from the previous week when I play weekly Legacy, because I want to try out a bunch of different stuff.
A small Japanese tournament.
Yeah, that. This past week, I played 2 copies of Lifetime Pass Holder from Unhinged because I wanted to play a contraption deck. And it was really funny, and I went 2-1, which is probably better than it should have been. Because I found this thing on Twitter that had a deck list.
X.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, I kind of view Commander the same way. Like, I want to play with the card Clock of Omens because that card is hilarious. And I have considered from time to time building a Clock of Omens deck in every color combination. I haven't because I have some self-restraint. Maybe someday I will find a deck, well, Magda, but maybe someday I'll find a deck that I enjoy that plays Clock of Omens competitively. But until that time, if I want to play like a more competitive deck, like, for instance, let's say we're playing for prizes and money. You can't get mad at someone for pulling up with, a full competitive deck when you are playing with something on the line.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to win whatever it is that you're trying to win. And if I'm in that situation, yeah, I'll build a deck that is higher powered and I'll show up with it and try to win games with it. And sometimes I like doing that. I really enjoy building decks with all the tools at my disposal. If my deck is made like X percentage more consistent by playing Mana Crypt, I'll put Mana Crypt in the deck. If the deck is made better by playing Mishra's Workshop, I'll put Mishra's Workshop in the deck. I don't really have a problem with that, and even if the game plan is not really conducive to being powerful, like, I want my decks to be as good as I can make them with the tools I have available. Which is why sometimes when we play things on the channel where I can't necessarily do that, I'll go out and try to build that deck for reals and see what happens. I tried that with Hilda and it didn't work out very well because Hilda's still not a very good game plan and the deck was bad. As Fallout releases its way into the world, I'll be trying to do that with Mothman because I really enjoyed the gameplay patterns that I had there. And if you haven't checked the video out, check it out.
I will say I also like to build a deck as well as I can within the restrictions given by the format. It's kind of weird because Commander, there's such a wide gap in the format. There's so many cards you can use, and some are very expensive, and some play patterns at the top can be very complicated and out of reach of a lot of people. Commander's a little more strange because it's supposed to be casual. Yeah. Which I always use it as. It's more casual because you're usually hanging out with your buds or whatever, and there's 4 of you.
That's the intent.
Yeah. But it actually making it a casual format where people have to make up their own guidelines to play together makes it really weird.
Yeah, which I have so much to say about the ban list, but we can do that some other time.
With Corbin's response in the stack, because he'll go for quite a bit. My kind of decks I like playing, I like to stay in the more tuned. If my deck's not performing, I get a little bored. I do like playing some decks that are on the more fun. The way we were talking about deck building before, building around a combo or versus a plan versus a commander. I like building around a commander. Sometimes it involves some bad decks. Sometimes it involves some good decks. Yeah, I've got certain decks like my vampire deck. I try to It is all vampires currently. There's no non-vampires in there. Then there's my human deck. That
plays
the first 3 creatures I played were not humans, and Corbin will never let me live that down.
Nope, I never saw a single human.
Yep, because he killed me before I could. But
No, because you played Thassa's Oracle and Tainted Pact before you could.
did I?
Oh, yeah.
Which is also not
Not a human.
There was a lot of humans in the deck. There was like 24 or something.
Don't believe you.
Yeah.
So that's the way I like to do it. I like building around specific commanders, but you gotta like be able to see who's in your pod. And I mean, we've played with a lot of the local people here a lot, so you can usually tell who I'm playing with. That I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play my Dragons deck today, or oh, I can actually play like Tivit or Calamax with this group and be a little bit more fun.
Power level is a figment of your imagination, so I like using my imagination. The short answer is it depends. A lot of my decks, I build a lot of storm decks because I think it's funny. You can only build so many Izzet decks before you get a hunger for something more. So any opportunity I have to build a storm deck, no matter what colors it is, because I have built mono white storm before, I would like to do it.
I still haven't seen you win with Astral Steel.
Yeah, same.
Matt and Corbin do on a consistent basis build decks doing opposite of what those colors should do.
Yeah, the color pie is also a figment of your imagination. Yeah, so I build a lot of storm decks because I like that play pattern. But I don't let that hinder me. I love playing a lot of different decks. Recently, what I've been doing is if I stumble across a deck in 60 card formats that I like the play patterns for, I will try very hard to import that deck into Commander. So again, my Cycle Storm deck is based off of Pauper Cycle Storm. And so if you're not familiar with Pauper Cycle Storm, look it up. There's a bunch of content creators like Brian Cook of the Epic Storm that play that deck. It's pretty sweet. It wins with a storm count of like 3. It's pretty funny. I've also looked at like stacks decks like Rule of Law recently because I wanted to make shrines as competitive as possible. So it really just depends. If I find a deck that I think is sweet and it's not a commander deck, I will import it into Commander. Or if I find a commander deck that I think the concept is sweet, but maybe I don't agree with how the deck was built, I will build it better or different, I guess I should say. I will adjust the power level of the deck for where I'm going to be playing that deck the most. So if I'm going to play it with friends like Matt blows up lands, that bro don't care, so I can do whatever I want. But if I'm out in public with people who think I'm public enemy number 1, because they either haven't met Matt or I'm louder than Matt and they judge me, I will specifically put some restrictions on the deck to help lower the power level. Like I said before, it's very hard for me to determine a power level of a deck because I win with precons, like on a consistent basis. I will win with other people's decks. I just win. I like winning. I know somebody in the comments asked me if I was an astrophysicist. I don't think I'm that smart, but I do like the strategy element of this game. So I will try to find strategies and play patterns that are maybe more on the casual side, like more for cycling, because those are interesting to me. And they also match the play patterns of the groups that I would be playing at. So I tend to have like 3 different types of decks that I play when money's on the line or packs or whatever you want to say. Something's on the line besides my pride. I will play these 2 or 3 decks. Then there'll be the decks that I play normally, usually. And then I'll have a couple decks that are usually budget decks, or decks with strategies that are very casual. I will play for people that I either have just met or that I don't trust to put up a real fight.
Well, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yep.
Transparency is the best policy.
Yeah, when it does come to like self-imposing restrictions, I feel like I'm really bad at that. A part of me really wishes there was maybe a different version of the format that was more condensed with a smaller card pool that was easier to wrap your head around.
You mean Brawl? That was for Matt. That was for Matt.
I don't mind Brawl, other than the arena-only cards.
The issue with a lot of these formats, like with Breaker and Brawl and things like that, is that you need to find people who are willing to play it.
Yeah.
It's like, I would build a Canadian Highlander deck, and I've seen people in the area mention, oh yeah, I've got a Canadian Highlander deck, but they never actually play it. So, like, why would I build a deck?
Yeah, a lot of those formats are fun, but with almost any game, it comes down to, can you find people to play it?
I think if you find a restriction that you like, impose it and see what happens.
I mean, we did it here, but
Yeah.
it's just harder in the real world. Like, you can't make other people.
Yeah.
I can make you guys follow my restrictions,
Yeah.
but
Self-imposed restrictions, I do a lot actually, because I need to shackle my enormous power.
Because
Yeah.
you think it's funny.
I mean,
that's why you
Yes, yes. Most things I do in life, I do because I think they're funny. So, for example, we were in a budget league where the restriction was it was a $75 budget, and the cards had to be
Pioneer one?
Pioneer legal.
Pioneer legal, yeah.
So I built a Sagas deck, a green-white Sagas deck, and I kept that deck after the tournament for a
And
little
he
bit
blew up
too.
lands.
Yeah,
A lot of them.
the Fall of the Tran is a saga.
Yeah.
And Matt was not in that budget league, so I had to
represent.
I had to pour one out for the homies and play some land destruction. But the deck was fun, and I liked playing it outside of that budget league too in different pods because it had roughly the same power level as a precon. And yeah, most of my decks outside of the upper tier ones that I talked about before will generally have some sort of restriction, such as budget, the type of cards. I don't really like old bordered cards, so a lot of my decks actually have the restriction that I just don't play old bordered cards, with the exception of 8 mana Nicol Bolas. If I ever get a Legends Nicol Bolas, I will build a old bordered Grixis deck.
So I think the moral of the story is, if you're like me, it's hard to impose restrictions. But if you're a really awesome player like Corbin and you want all the style points you can get, it's a little easier.
I mean, kind of, but you just have to. You will eventually, if you play enough games of Magic, you will figure out restrictions that work for you that don't take away the fun, and it can be different for each deck. I think one of the coolest things you can do if you're looking for style points is to roll up with your deck. And I started getting the idea from people who want to play like, well, this is tribal chairs or tribal doors or whatever. I'm like, well, that's stupid, but good for you. I'm happy for you. And I started looking at what can I do that is along that lines, but that I don't personally think is dumb. When I say things are stupid or dumb, that's just how I feel. That's my opinion. If you don't like it, get your own. But I'm also empathetic that everybody has their own opinion. I'm not going to put my opinion on somebody else, and I don't expect them to do the same to me. Treat other people how you would like to be treated.
I personally think chairs are pretty cool.
Except this one.
Speaking of restrictions and putting restrictions on other people, we're probably not going to talk about it this time, and it'll probably be a future conversation, but I know people are going to think about it. Rule 0 is definitely something that is a hard restriction to deal with right
You
now.
want a bunch of nerds to talk to each other?
Yeah, unless you are specifically talking about, I have these restrictions within this specific group, like we do in the channel. Like we have the budget restrictions and we have the combo restrictions. It's very hard to get a group of people to not only agree on a set of restrictions, but also like, that's only going to work for your group. Like if you go out somewhere else and you're like, oh, well, we usually play with these restrictions, and they're like, that's nice. They might reflect your power level if they've got multiple decks, and they're like, oh, well, I guess I could play something that's a little less, strong. But they're not going to be like, well, allow me to take out my Soul Ring and my Cyclonic Rift because I know you don't like those cards. That's pretty unlikely.
Which it's interesting to me, and I guess we'll try to leave it at this. The concept of Rule 0, so everybody kind of uses the Rule 0 thing right away. Like, oh, if you don't like it, just Rule 0 it. Meh, meh, meh. Okay, cool. And then it doesn't happen, and there's still this outcry. But the moment a card shop says, hey, this is our card shop ban list, people might grumble about it. Like, it's not like people are gonna boycott that card shop.
Well,
For the most part, like
Well-
a lot of people silent suffer. I'm just saying, a lot of people silent suffer. And I'll see Reddit posts where people are like, "Hey, my card shop banned Cyclonic Rift," and then everybody and their mama gets on there and like, "Oh, that's stupid. Get a new card shop." And then the person doesn't, and they just play under those restrictions. When you have an authority figure that is giving you these restrictions, it's a lot easier to justify it. For example, the ban list. It's all nice and sweet that everybody should just rule 0, but I don't know a lot of people outside of special occasions that just straight up ignore the ban list because it was made by an authority figure. They're like, hey, these are the cards that we think shouldn't be in the format, and everybody's just like, okay. And they'll grumble about it, like, why is Reoccurring Nightmare on the ban list? But we still just do it. So I think Rule 0 is also a figment of our imagination. And we, as social creatures, kind of crave the
easy
organization. Yeah, like we don't want to think. So if you give us the answer that doesn't require us to think outside the box or have to adjust to unique circumstances, we want a black and white, here, do this, don't do this.
We're going to move on to the next question is, I haven't asked this yet, right?
No.
What is fun to you?
We've answered it a few times, but we haven't.
Yeah.
Because some of us read the outline.
What is fun? I think fun to me in Magic, I personally enjoy. I like it when the decks can be like more kind of themey, and I also like games that are between 4 to 5 minutes and an hour and a half. If they're too short's okay. I don't mind that. I know a lot of people don't like it because they don't have time to do their thing. But I think my sweet spot would be around there. Anything longer than that, I start to kind of phase out and get tired and sleepy.
And he doesn't come back in until the untap step.
I do like a lot of interaction in the games. I think that is important. Like, I like back and forth between players. Even if I don't get to do my thing or whatever, I think as long as I feel like we're all playing a game together and not like playing our own game, I enjoy that.
I do know some people that get really upset when you stop their combo or whatever, and it's like, dude, just go play solitaire.
Yeah.
I actually feel really disappointed when nobody tries to like stop my combo to win. When it's just like I just have it and like there was no like fight over it. It's kind of like, okay. What's fun for me is efficiency. As it's been pointed out to me before, I really like commanders that either make mana or draw cards. I enjoy efficiency. I enjoy making cards as efficient as I can make them. Sometimes even my pet cards are more about efficiency. I cast Dig Through Time a lot.
That's true.
It's one of my favorites. But yeah, I feel like efficiency is probably my favorite thing to do. I guess I'm just repeating myself now, ain't I?
It's not very efficient of you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oof. I've never done it on the channel, but there's been a few times in casual play where I've sandbagged, as Matt's talked about before, where like you sandbag it for a couple turns just to kind of let people do their thing.
That's something that's not fun to me. I always feel like if I learn a person, just let me do it.
Oh, you never tell
I
them.
feel so bad.
You're a dick if you're like, I could have done this 4 turns ago.
Or like if I know, like they play.
Every time I sandbag, I regret it for multiple reasons. Either because I end up losing that 3-hour game, I sandbagged.
Why?
Because I wanted to cast the Great Aurora, and I couldn't. But I could have just won that turn, and I left that game upset for 2 reasons. One, because I still didn't cast the Great Aurora. That was the main reason I was upset. But 2, I don't know. I view it a little disrespectful. Like, yeah, I don't have to come up and, haul off and clock you all in the face. But the fact that I didn't win when I could have
means that you thought that we weren't able to take it, or
so I felt bad about that too. I was just like, that's a tad disrespectful.
Well, Matt, what's fun to you besides
What's
blowing
fun
up
to me?
everybody's lands?
Well, I do enjoy some good salt. I subscribe by the fact that there's a limited amount of fun to be had, and if I'm not having there's a few different things that make me enjoy Magic, and I've been playing for a long time. I met a lot of my friends with Magic. Like, there's the whole community aspect. Like, I wouldn't have known any of these dorks if I didn't play Magic, and all of the other people I have met are because of that. It's fun to go out and talk to people sometimes.
I will say that is the main reason I played Magic ever to begin with.
That's another reason why Commander's fun, because it's a little bit more relaxed. As long as you're not playing like actual CDH, Like, there's the creative aspect to it. You want to build a deck, you want to do some specific things. How do I do that? Ties into the community part. Hey, Corbin, how do I make this deck actually do the thing that I want it to do? He claims that he's going to figure out how to make Zerlin good.
I will.
We'll see.
I think the majority is you need to change your play patterns for that deck.
And then, like, the game itself. Like, it's fun to execute the combos. It's fun to, like, think through your turns and figure out, okay, I could go now, but if I do, someone might stop me. Maybe I should wait a little bit longer.
What's fun for me is everything that Matt said, basically. I like the community aspect. I like being creative with the decks. A lot of the comments that have come in on the videos about how, man, I like how this deck is constructed. People who are begging for deck lists, even though they don't want to go on Patreon. One day without your Starbucks coffee gets you all of these deck lists.
Coffee's more than $5 now.
Okay, there you go, inflation. So this is even cheaper. I actually really like, from a community standpoint, helping people have more fun. And that's why I like Commander. Because people want to do their stupid combo or they want to play with this specific commander. And I love figuring out ways to help them do that. Like, hey, maybe you should play this card. It's funny. People who don't know me, when I give them advice, they immediately think I'm going to be like a lot of other people where they're like, well, take out all your tap lands and put in these duels and shocks and stuff. So they're like, well, I have a budget restriction. I'm like, bro, you didn't even let me cook. Calm down. And so I'll start naming all these like 25 cent and 5 cent cards, and I'm like,
and they're like, that's a lot of cards, and you're like, yeah, but it'll cost you $1.
Yep.
You've got to hand them a pen and paper a lot because
like,
there's so many
go.
cards you've never heard of before in your life. Like,
it's like there's this old card in Arcadian Masks that you should be playing. So I love doing that. I like playing this game, and I want people to have fun, but I want them to also like playing the game and have fun and be better. Because if I build them up and it's more of a challenge for me, then I have more fun. That's why I like playing, the main reason I like playing Commander versus 60 card formats is that the multiplayer aspect adds another dimension of difficulty. Because now you're kind of handicapping yourself in a way. You're facing an opponent that draws 3 times as many cards than you on average. They make 3 times as much mana. They have 3 times as much resources. And that challenge is very appealing to me. It benefits me to help these young saplings grow into nice, strong trees so that I can chop them down later.
Is there any way you guys would prefer to see the actual format, like Wizards of the Coast do a Rule Zero on everyone? Condense the format in a way that might be more fun for more people?
I think that's really hard to do. Like, they've obviously, like, doing actual, like, new formats and things, you've got to get people that actually, like, subscribe to doing that.
Well, I'm just saying they changed the main commander format. Maybe they break off a CDH, they give it a different name that has
different rules and all that.
And then the main one that they support with their current releases would be the new commander.
Maybe. I mean, that's kind of like what they did with Legacy and Vintage. So, for those of you who weren't around in the ancient times, the way that Legacy and Vintage used to work, they were called Type 1 and Type 1.5. And Type 1.5, which we now know today is Legacy, was just, its ban list was the Vintage restricted list, but all the cards were banned instead. Vintage had Black Lotus restricted, and Legacy it was banned. And what that ended up doing was creating a format of Legacy that no one wanted to play because it was just like kind of an afterthought off of Vintage. When they split those out, and Vintage was allowed to become its own thing, and Legacy was kind of off on its own, it allowed the Legacy ban list to become more refined, more like apt and adaptable to the format of Legacy. And at that point, like, Legacy became more of a big thing, and you don't see a lot of Vintage tournaments these days. Vintage is kind of prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. Legacy became more of the, like, high power format for 1v1. The reason I'm bringing this up is because you could do something similar to Commander, and you could say, like, here's my no holds barred, everyone can play Profit Accrue Fix, and Demonic Consultation and Dockside Extortionist format, and here's my, I would like to, like, have a more reasonable game plan, and maybe we've kind of taken out most of the 2-card combos kind of a format. But the issue there is people only have so much time and effort to put into this game. If you do that, you're probably going to pick one or the other. You might have decks for both, but you're really going to probably just be focused on one, and at that point one of those formats probably kind of dies off.
Isn't that kind of what we have now with CEDH
Sort
and
of.
everything else?
Sort of, yeah, because CEDH is kind of its own community and all that, but they follow the same restrictions as Commander does.
Yeah. The only reason it's not actually split because Wizards hasn't actually given rules to split them, but they're,
Right.
for all intents and purposes currently they are different formats.
But the point I'm trying to
way
make
people
is that if you're maintaining separate ban lists and you have completely separate formats, and no matter how much these things look alike, they're not going to be the same. And if you have all of your people playing Commander and not CEDH, and you want to make a tournament, like you want to put prizes on the line, you want to get people coming in every Sunday playing for 6 hours or whatever, playing a format, you're going to choose the one that all the people around you play. In this case, probably Commander. That doesn't mean those people aren't going to be competitive, because again, there's prizes on the line, there's a tournament going on. People are going to do that, and then they're going to push the boundaries of that, and then that's going to create its own metagame. And then what do? Do you take all of the powerful things from that and create like a middle tier so that all the casual people can finally play in their casual piece? But oh no, you've created a tournament for that, and now there's a metagame forming around that and all the powerful things that go into that.
I think they kind of do that, don't they? So they went from modern, and then they had Frontier,
that's more of like card restrictions for they wanted people to play with the newest cards versus like they wanted people to play with the more powerful cards. But there is kind of a point to that. They do have different ban philosophies behind those different formats. I think all the cards that are banned in Modern now might be more applicable these days if they unban them. The point is, like, if you compare Commander to, let's say, competitive 1v1 Pokemon, because they do something very similar to that. They have tiers of things. Like, if you want to run with anything, you play in this tier. If you want to run with the most used Pokemon below that, you go to this tier. Everything that's good in that tier is banned in the tier below that. The problem with that kind of a tiered system, of course, is that you then need people to play all these different tiers.
Right.
And that's easier to do when you're playing an online game like 1v1 Pokemon and everyone's going onto this one website and they're all like, everyone in the world goes to the same tournaments kind of a thing. But when you're playing casual Commander at a table, you go up to your local game store and you say, okay, I've got, this tier of deck, and everyone else is like, well, but we play at this tier. What's the point of having all these tiers if no one plays half of them?
Sure. What we have currently is you show up to a table with a CEDH deck, which is completely different structurally than the other decks.
I mean,
and then you're like playing a different game. But also CEDH decks, if you're playing against 3 casual decks, it's not necessarily going to be the best deck at that table.
You might just get randomly bodied by aggro.
Yeah, or like you're not expecting people to be running 10 board wipes in all 3 decks, and like you can't even play because you're built for a different format, basically. But a lot of the other times you could just wipe them turn 2.
Sometimes though, like you have to realize that if you're the person who shows up to a casual table with a CEDH deck, like
You might be the problem.
yeah, it's on you not reading the room. You can like ask around, hey, what power level do you play at? Is not really a good question because again, we've spent this whole episode trying to define power level and saying what that means to us, and we haven't even like come up with this is how you figure it out kind of a solution because it's very complex.
Yeah.
So I think for that reason, it's really difficult to equalize, and people have tried. Like you look at some things like the Canadian Highlander ban list where they're like, okay, this card is worth this much money or this many points, and you can't play with that, or you look at budget restrictions, or you look at all these different things, and that will work to a certain point.
Just off the top of my head, thinking about it, if Wizards was actually to do a point system with an easy-to-use calculator online app, what do you think the negatives would be of that? Like, where would it fall through, do you think?
A lot of it has to do with context. Because Commander is a format where you have something in the command zone, and that drastically alters what options you have available to you, not only for color restrictions, but also just like I have this card or cards in a place that I have access to all the time. That certain cards are more or less powerful depending on what you're doing. I would not play Lion's Eye Diamond in the majority of the decks that I have because it does not do anything for my game plan. It's not useful.
So what we need is a dynamic point system that changes points based on your commander and other cards you include in your deck. That sounds easy.
You need 8 algorithms all working in tandem.
Or, hear me out, like, this is the time when you actually use Rule Zero. Like, if you sit down and play, and the game was filled bad for 75% of the table, have a conversation about that, and don't have it in a way that you're, hey, man, that wasn't really fun. Like, something like that, instead of,
I'm never playing with you again.
yeah. And I get it. That's hard to do if you've never done this in your life. But practice makes perfect. If you want... Be the change you wish to see in the world, right? So if something wasn't fun for you multiple times or even just one time, have a conversation. Hey, man, nobody here really likes it when you play land destruction. Or maybe it's math land destruction. Maybe that person can switch to like Worldfire or something and only blow up 4 lands instead of all the lands.
Wildfire. Worldfire gets rid of everything.
Sure. Yeah, Worldfire is that thing that just got unbanned, right? Wild. Just like 3 years ago. Yeah. But yes, Wildfire or Destructive Force or even Demolish. Because I personally think being able to take out problematic lands is actually pretty useful sometimes. The whole point of that tangent was it starts with a discussion. And going back to some of the previous things we talked about of what's fun, a lot of us talked about creativity. Those discussions actually, if met with an open mind, breed creativity. If your play group doesn't like a certain way you're doing things, find a different way to do the same things. That maybe it's more flavorful. Maybe it matches your commander more. Instead of just playing generic Armageddon, maybe you're playing the most dangerous gamer and the one attraction that lets you activate him to blow up somebody's land.
Well, I personally feel like
So
when Matt
operate
blows up the
in that.
lands, I'm like, oh, I should have.
Mana
I'm thinking,
rocks.
what could I do to stop that in future games from
Yeah.
happening? Like, it's on me, not him.
Play some counter spells, blow up his lands before he blows up your lands. That's the correct choice.
That's more how I feel about it. The only thing that really actually does salt me out is just games go so long. It's like a
that's fair.
physical
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah, that goes into the whole, like, what is everyone trying to do with the game? That is kind of another equalization thing for making sure that you're in the right play group is see how long everyone wants to play the game.
It sounded like you were just saying Rule Zero is the answer. Is that what I got?
Yeah,
Your
just talk to
statement?
people.
It's the answer and not the answer because it is
It's a
the
figment of your imagination, but it's also what you should
It's
do.
not something you should be physically imposing on other people, but you should be talking.
correct.
Yeah.
Basically, no matter what you do, no matter what precautions you take, no matter what kind of rules you set up, like, there's going to be some imbalance.
Yep.
One of the decks at the table is undoubtedly going to be stronger than the others.
Yep.
Or maybe it's going to have a better matchup against what's going on. There is only so much you can do.
That's why you
Overall,
always target Matt first.
Yeah,
no
that's
matter
why you
what.
always target Matt first because
Which is wild.
he-
Targeting me first.
Or
obviously.
if you're both at the table, just give up.
Matt's always up to some shit.
So I guess in summation, be nice to people.
Yeah.
If the better player you are, try to be more self-aware and help others
Yeah.
through this journey.
And, like, talk to people. Do any kind of discussion. Don't just be like, oh yeah, I'm at a 7.
I asked my wife once.
What power level your deck is?
No, I asked my wife once if I was the only one she's ever been with, and she said, yeah. The rest were 9s and 10s.
Take your dad jokes somewhere else, please.
The real point of this is
Oh,
we're not playing
man.
CDH. Stop it. Stop saying we're playing CDH. We're not playing CDH.
Yeah, that was the whole reason we made this podcast.
whole reason we made this
It's
podcast.
not.
So I think that's about going to wrap up our very branching conversation on power level. But before we leave, I do want to say that these 3 guys are going to be at MagicCon Chicago this weekend.
Yeah.
So if you want to hunt them down and do whatever.
I don't want to be hunted particularly. I want to play Magic.
But if you see us and want to play a game, mention it.
And with that, I think we're going to be wrapping up our very first podcast here. Thank you all for watching. Say bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.